You know, when we think of Adam and Eve's descendants, we usually think of Cain and Abel, right? But there's so much more to their story. Not many people know about Adam and Eve's daughters. Who were they? How many were there? We're digging into ancient texts like the Book of Jubilees, the Holy Bible, and old traditions to find the truth behind the daughters of Adam and Eve. You see, while everyone remembers Cain and Abel, not many realize that Adam and Eve had a bunch of daughters too. Genesis gives us a hint, mentioning that Adam lived for 930 years and had a whole bunch of kids. But their names? Well, that's where things get interesting. Ancient Jewish traditions like the Book of Jubilees offer some clues about these mysterious daughters. This book, often called the Little Genesis, fills in some gaps about Adam and Eve's family tree. While the Book of Jubilees isn't exactly a recent find, the oldest manuscript we've got access to dates back to around 700 BCE. But get this, that manuscript is just a copy of an even older work. Some scholars link the Book of Jubilees with the Book of Chronicles, suggesting that maybe the scribe Ezra penned it. But according to the Book of Jubilees itself, Moses is the real author. It claims he got the truth from an angel up on Mount Horeb. Now, speaking of Moses, you know that famous story of him spending 40 days and nights on Mount Horeb without eating or drinking. Well, it's mentioned in the Bible, adding some weight to the idea that maybe Moses did write the Book of Jubilees. And this book has a big presence in Israelite culture, with copies floating around all over the place. And get this, it even mentions another mysterious book, the Book of Enoch, which was a big deal for early Christians and was even part of their Bible. This just goes to show we shouldn't overlook the Book of Jubilees. It's full of stuff that lines up with the Bible's stories. Okay, back to Adam and Eve. According to ancient Semitic Abrahamic traditions, Adam and Eve's first daughter was named Avan. In Phoenician Hebrew, Avan means potency or just vice. Now hold on, because here's where it gets juicy. Avan was actually both the wife and sister of Cain, Adam and Eve's son. The Book of Jubilees says she had kids with Cain, and one of them was named Enoch. You might have heard of him, the guy who got a whole city named after him. After Cain was booted for killing Abel, he went on to build the city of Enoch, honoring his son. Now, Avan's name pops up in the Book of Jubilees and other Abrahamic texts too, but sometimes she's called Kalima. Now on to the next daughter, Azurah. She was Adam and Eve's second daughter. Azurah tied the knot with Seth, who was Adam and Eve's third son, born after Abel died tragically. Now, Seth's name has Hebrew roots, and it's all about compensation or substitution. This is pretty significant, because after Cain did the unthinkable and killed Abel, Adam and Eve saw Seth as a sort of replacement, someone to fill the gap left by Abel's loss. Seth was seen as a good guy, someone who kept the faith and honored God. And get this, his family line played a big role in some major events down the line, like Noah in the whole flood story. So Seth and Azurah, they were like a key link in the chain, connecting humanity's beginnings to some pretty important stuff in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Now, the Book of Jubilees throws in a fascinating twist. It says that Azurah was actually Abel's first wife, but became a widow after his death. Then, when Seth grew up, he married Azurah, and guess what? They had a son named Enos. Enos ended up marrying his sister Noah, who was also Seth and Azurah's daughter. Enos was known for being a pretty devout guy, all about worshiping God. You can find a bit about him in the Bible too, in Genesis 5. So what about Enos? Well, dude lived a whopping 905 years before kicking the bucket. Now what made Enos stand out? Well, the guy was all about prayer and spreading the Word of God. And if you think all that marrying your siblings part was a little unexpected, make sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button so we can bring you more stories from lesser-known Christian texts. In Genesis 4, verse 26, it's mentioned that during Enos' time, folks started getting serious about calling on the name of the Lord. Basically, Enos was like the spiritual guru of his day, sparking a whole movement of worship and devotion among Seth's descendants. Now, let's circle back to Cain and Seth. According to ancient texts like the Book of Jubilees and Semitic Jewish tradition, Cain tied the knot with his sister Avon, kickstarting the Cain family tree. Meanwhile, Seth married his sister Azurah, laying the groundwork for the Seth lineage. And hey, we know you're curious about how many kids Adam and Eve had, right? Well, let me tell you, they were like the ultimate power couple in the baby-making department. With Adam living over 800 years and Eve being super fertile, they cranked out hundreds upon hundreds of sons and daughters. And get this, according to the Guinness World Records, there's a woman who holds the title for popping out the most kids in history. She had a whopping 69 kids. But Eve, from the Bible, she puts Valentina to shame. If a woman today could have 69 kids, imagine what Eve, who lived for a whopping 900 years according to the Bible, could have achieved. And speaking of Adam and Eve, they're said to have had loads of children. Some say around 70 or even more. With their robust health and fertility, they could have easily had hundreds of sons and daughters. And you know what's cool? In Genesis 6:1, it mentions how Adam's descendants were popping out beautiful daughters left and right. Plus, here's a little-known fact. Adam and Eve's kids didn't all look the same. Nope. They had their own ethnic backgrounds, since Adam and Eve were originally from different races. It's pretty neat, right? And get this. There's this thing called mitochondrial DNA that traces all of humanity back to a single woman. Kind of like a genetic grandma. It just goes to show no matter where we come from, we all share a common ancestor in Adam and Eve. Pretty fascinating stuff, huh? But if you want to learn more about some Christian stories, make sure to click on this next video.